told not to trip over myself, which is very good advice because getting down is not so hard, but getting back up is a lot harder. Now, I want you to know, in 1983, which is how I remember that date so well, that first talk was here at this Cheshire Library. And I don't know if any of you were here, but Maria Poirier was in charge of programming, and she had called me up, and they were running a series on healing, and they had somebody speaking on massage therapy and someone on Tai Chi, and I was doing stand-up comedy at Cass's place, and I was doing therapy in my home office, and I was teaching at Southern. And she calls me up and she says, well, obviously you know about being funny, and also you know about therapy, and obviously you're a teacher, would you be willing to come and speak about how therapeutic laughter is? I said, sure. And I just got married in May, and he had no idea how crazy I really was. So when he came home from, because the school principal, he came home and I said, honey, guess what? I'm going to be speaking at the Cheshire Library in September on the physiological benefits of laughter. And he said, oh, that's great. He said, what do you know about it? I said, well, truthfully, nothing. But I know it's true, and I know how to read. And what was so wonderful is Cheshire Library always sends out their calendar. So it got covered, that first talk got covered by the New Haven Register, the Waterbury Republican, and the Hartford Courant. And the next day I started getting phone calls from people, and I became world famous in Connecticut. My big claim to fame is being world famous in Connecticut. And now I'm also world famous in South Florida. So if you were down there for those months, you can certainly come and I'll make sure you can get in. Now, I always like to share at least a joke before I get to more serious topics. So I will tell you, last year on Christmas, as it happens, and I don't know how many of you know a lot of Jewish people, however, Jewish people on Christmas Eve, the tradition is we go to a Chinese restaurant, because they're open, and we go to a movie. But Christmas Day, nobody has anything to do, because we don't have families having big Christmas dinners. So on Christmas Day, I had a concert at my house, with a viola player and a guitarist, and they sang together, and they just got married last night. These are two really gifted musicians, and I had a concert at my house. I ended up with 53 people in my little living room. That's how many people had no place to go on Christmas Day. And I figured, I had to start off with a joke. How can you not have a joke before you have serious music, right? So this is my Christmas joke, and if you forget any of the components, just call my house. It's a free call now, okay? Here is my Christmas joke. An Englishman, a Scotsman, and an Irishman were in a car together on Christmas Eve, and they get into a terrible car accident, and they are instantly killed. And they end up in heaven, and St. Peter says to them, if you can show me a symbol of Christmas, you can come right in the pearly gates. So the Englishman reaches into his pocket, pulls out the lighter, flicks the lighter, and it says Christmas candles. St. Peter says, great, come on in. Now the Scotsman reaches into his pocket, he pulls out his keys, and he jingles the keys. And he says, bells. And St. Peter says, terrific, come on in. And the Irishman is fitching around in all of his pockets. Finally, he pulls out a pair of ladies' underpants. And St. Peter says to him, what kind of a symbol is that? He said, these are carols. Now, I do a lot of speaking engagements while I'm in Florida because they're all like developments, right? And, homes for senior residents. So I was telling that joke because I'd never heard it before. And each time I would say to people, and sometimes there'd be 300 people in a group, and I'd say, who has ever heard this joke before, right? And no one had ever heard the joke until my last talk, right before I was leaving to come back to Connecticut. I said, has anyone heard this joke before? One guy raised his hand. I said, no kidding. I said, where'd you hear it? He said, I was in your talk last month. But it is so terrific to be able to have a joke, to be able to share a joke. And I don't care where you are politically. If you are not at least a little bit concerned about what's going on in the world right now, you should be, right? So it's good to have little things that help you lighten up. And jokes are it's like a shortcut to lightening up. A joke, you don't have to make it up yourself. All you have to do is repeat it. And if you have difficulty remembering jokes, if you tell the joke 3 times, even if it's over the telephone, write it down, tell the joke 3 times, and then it's yours. When that topic comes up again, you will remember that joke, at least part of it. Now, today's talk is, in fact, part of the first talk I ever gave in my entire life on the topic of laughter, and I gave it right here in my Cheshire library. So I am always delighted to be here. I told, when Deborah called me up, she said, "Are you still giving talks?" I said, "Yes, of course I am." She said, "Well, would you be willing to come and speak for us at the Cheshire Library?" I said to her, "Deb, the Cheshire Library could ask me to come out naked from a cake. Whatever the Cheshire Library asked me to do, I would absolutely be doing. A, I love Cheshire. B, I love the Cheshire Library. And 3, all of the money that I have given away, I wouldn't have. I mean, I have a nice pension from Southern, but believe me, I've never made $1 million. So this has been just such a wonderful gift to have been given an opportunity to research a new area. And now I research a whole lot of new areas, which is why last month, I did a humorous look at sex and aging, and I have a number of them. I've been doing a lot of them now. I've been putting together information on my new talk, which is for this coming year. I have a lot of keynotes already, planned when I go back to Florida. So the new topic for next year is called, "Do You Need a Penis to Be Funny?" We'll look at gender differences and humor. Right? Now I know this is going to be a great topic because Brandeis University Women's Study Group booked me for when I get back to Florida, and I gave her that as my second topic, and she writes to me right away, "Joyce, I can't list that in the study guide." Would it be all right if I wrote, "Look at gender differences in humor"? I said, "Of course." But I want you to think about that. The people in this study group are our age, okay? Is there anybody in this room who is offended by either the word or the concept of penis? I couldn't believe it. I mean, this is 2019, for God's sake. The word penis, I can think of a lot of words I could have used, right? That might have been mildly offensive to somebody, but penis, what a great thing. Anyhow, you can't change people's concept of what's an appropriate title. What I'm going to be telling you today, the first part of my talk is going to be about the physiological benefits of laughter. What is it that happens in your body when you laugh very hard? And the second part will be ways to bring more laughter into your life. And to start with, because I am a teacher, and teachers are supposed to use visual aids, I have brought with me a picture of a naked man. Don't get too excited. This used to be an American Health magazine. This is Slim Goodbody. And Slim Goodbody goes around to health fairs and school systems, and he demonstrates through this costume, which is his internal organs on the outside, he demonstrates what happens in your body when you laugh very hard. Right? Now, I noticed a few of you are stuck on a part that seems to be missing. I believe that's because when you laugh very hard, it gets smaller. But only when in use. Slim Goodbody tells us when you laugh very hard, your heart pace and force quicken to meet the sudden oxygen demand. In your lungs, pressure builds before air blows out. Your throat goes into uncoordinated spasms. Your diaphragm, the one God placed there, is stimulated when you laugh very hard. Your lacrimal glands are stimulated. You know the glands that make your eyes tear? You've all had that, right? You laughed hard enough for your eyes to tear? Let me tell you what's good about that. In my first life, when I was living here in Cheshire, I was married for 15 years, and during that time I learned from my husband that after it snows, the air is clearer because the snowflakes take down the dust particles in the air. Did you know that? 15 years of marriage, that's what I learned. Well, what happens is that the lacrimal glands have the same effect on your body. When you laugh hard enough, your eyes will tear, all the little particles that accumulate on the surface of your eyes are washed away. So when we look around, everything looks brighter. Now, this is especially good if some of the people you live with or work with are not too sharp. After a good laugh, they all look brighter. Another wonderful thing that happens when we laugh very hard is all the little capillaries under the surface of your skin aerate and take in extra oxygen. Right? I call this the Orange Julius effect. You know the machine in the mall that makes that bubbly drink? Happens under the surface of your skin and it makes your cheeks pink. Now, I am wearing eye makeup and lipstick. I do not own foundation or blush. There's nothing on my face ever. And my cheeks are almost always pink. You think pink? I have pink cheeks even when I'm not having a hot flash. You know I don't have hot flash. I don't even have power surges anymore. Actually, apropos of hot flashes, I mean, I don't know how many of you know this, but one of my goals in life was to make it into the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest woman ever to be buried in a maxi pad. Well, you know, if you're on estrogen replacement, you can menstruate until you die. And of course, if I was going to be buried in a maxi pad, I was hoping it had wings. Now, when you laugh extra, in fact, you look much healthier. And this is especially good for you guys to know, because men look a little tacky with blush on. So you're better off laughing more and getting your cheeks pink. All right, another wonderful thing that happens when you laugh very hard is that your pituitary gland is stimulated. And your pituitary gland rushes off and produces endorphins and enkephalins, which are natural painkillers that, according to Dr. Deepak Chopra, are 200 times more powerful than morphine. We actually produce 200 times the pain-killing effect in our bodies from laughing as from pain-killing drugs, which is a great thing to know. And truthfully, I often think that if more of us would take the extra few minutes to get together with a friend and laugh together, we'd be on many fewer drugs, which is great. Now, I'm sure you all know the story of Norman Cousins. Norman Cousins was the editor of the Saturday Review for 35 years, and he came down with ankylosing spondylitis, which is a progressive spinal disorder. And the doctor told him that he had 1 in 500 chances of recovery. And Norman Cousins was not that thrilled with this prognosis. You know, 1 in 500, not such great odds. Norman Cousins decided that if negative thinking could make you sick, then positive thinking should make you better. So what he did was he checked himself out of the hospital with his doctor's assistants, which, by the way, I hope you know is a good move when you're not feeling well. Because you're much better off any place other than the hospital, where you're supposed to get a good night's sleep if they didn't wake you up every hour, right? He checked himself out of the hospital and checked himself into a hotel room, where he proceeded to douse himself with Marx Brothers movies and candid camera segments and other things that made him laugh. And Norman Cousins found that for every 10 minutes of belly laughs, he was able to get 2 hours of pain-free, uninterrupted sleep. Right? Totally uninterrupted. Norman Cousins not only recovered from ankylosing spondylitis, but he was made an adjunct professor of medicine at the UCLA Medical School, which was an incredible privilege for a layman. He was not a physician, and yet he was put on a medical school faculty and was speaking virtually all over the world on the value of laughter and positive thinking in the healing process. Now, I want to give you some idea of his sense of humor. At one point, the nurse comes in and says, "Well, Mr. Cousins, it's time for your morning urine specimen." And she hands him a specimen container, and she leaves the room. He's a grown man. He knows what to do with a specimen container. As soon as the nurse leaves the room, he proceeds to fill up the container with apple juice. The nurse comes back a little bit later. She takes the container. She looks at it. She says, "Oh, Mr. Cousins, your sample is terribly cloudy today." And he looks at it and he says, "You know, you're absolutely right. I better put it through again." And he drank it. Now, I want to tell you, I found this story a little bit suspicious. You know, it sounded like one of those apocryphal stories like you hear about this one in the elevator and this what happened and all. I finally got the guts to write to Norman Cousins at UCLA Medical School. And I explained to him that I give these lectures all over the country and I love this story, but I don't want to pass on a story that may not be true. Would he please let me know if this incident had actually occurred? And do you know that as busy as he was, he actually wrote back? And he said, yes, the incident was true, and the apple juice was Mott's. But my favorite part of the letter that he wrote to me, he said, "And the smile on my nurse's face is one I remember to this day." He was telling me, a total stranger, just looking for verification of a funny story, he was telling me that the affect his nurse had shown 11 years before I wrote that letter. 11 years. And he still remembered the smile on his nurse's face. And I think that sometimes we get so caught up in administrivia and other crap that we forget the most important thing you have to give to your friends and your family is you. The extra minute. How was your vacation? It's the truth. It's true. That is the truth. And with cell phones now taking over the world, right? We really have got to somehow or another remember that face-to-face contact, talking to each other, touching each other, what a remarkable healing thing it is to be able to connect with people live. So think about that. Now, Norman Cousins, as some of you may know, Norman Cousins actually died some years ago. And this was many years later. He died at the age of 75, not of ankylosing spondylitis. He died of a heart attack, right? And I will tell you that his legacy did more to legitimize the mind-body connection than anybody else had anywhere in any field, right? And to date, there have been a lot of other people, obviously now, since it's such a popular topic, there have been many other people who have exemplified some of what Norman Cousins was talking about. One of my favorite stories, I get these articles from people all the time. So one of my all-time favorite stories came from this publication, which was the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it's a letter written by a daughter whose mother was so thrifty, she was past frugal. This lady never bought anything she couldn't use forever, and exactly for the purpose for which it was purchased. And the only exception, she got herself a very nice nightgown, which she kept wrapped up in tissue paper in the bottom dresser drawer. What's it for? What's it for? Who said when she died? Who the hell do you know gets buried in a nightgown? That is one sad story. Yes, for the hospital, in case she ends up in the hospital. Now, having said that, I do want to tell you, we are very caught up in lingerie. I know that. So let me ask you this question. How many of you do not generally wear torn underwear? I mean, you don't usually wear torn underwear. You can raise your hand, it's okay. Okay. Now, we all have this underwear. Right? Mine is scrunched up in a little ball behind the good stuff. Right? It is air conditioned. It has no elastic. When you really want to feel great, you put it on, right? This is great stuff. How come we don't wear it? In case what? In case you get hit by a car and end up in the hospital, right? I asked this question, the first hospital that I ever asked it, that I was speaking for Rockville General Hospital, and I asked the nurse, it was Nurses' Day, it was May 8th, and I said to these nurses, how many of you don't wear torn underwear? They all raised their hand. I asked them why. They said the same thing. In case you get hit by a car and end up in the hospital. These people work in the hospital. So I asked them this. I said, if somebody, God forbid, is hit by a car, they are bleeding profusely, they end up in the hospital, they have internal injuries, who knows what, and you examine them, and their underwear is torn. Do you send them home? And I want you to know that not only do they not send us home, but when you get to the hospital, they cut your underwear off. So if some morning you get up and say to yourself, you know, today I might have an accident, that's the day to wear your torn underwear. Okay? But apparently this lady believed, as we all do, it's important to have nice lingerie in case you end up in the hospital. And by the way, I had a 90-some-odd-year-old lady sitting right over in that first seat, in the first row, and when I said, why does she need nice lingerie? She said, in case you get lucky. I just love that. So, her mother is very sick, and she is getting all kinds of shivers and shakes, and they can't get rid of her. So they finally put her into the hospital, put her through a series of tests, and they tell the daughter, who is the one writing the article, your mother has a progressive disseminated lymphoma and has 2 to 3 weeks left to live, definitely less than a month. And the daughter agonized, how should she handle this? Should she tell her mother? Should she tell the family? What should she do with this terrible news? She finally decided with such terrible news, she's not going to tell anybody. That instead she's going to go out and buy her mother a new nightgown and matching robe in case she should at least feel better, since she's not going to be able to cure her. So she goes and she buys this and delivers it to her mother as an early 69th birthday present, because she's not going to live till her 69th birthday. The mother opens up the present on a hospital bed, she looks at it, she says, it's very nice, but I really don't want it. Would you mind returning it? What I really would like is this. And she points to a newspaper advertisement of expensive designer summer purses. And this is January in Chicago. And the daughter writes, my reaction was one of disbelief. Why would my mother so careful about extravagances, wants an expensive summer purse in January, one that she could not possibly use until June. She would not even live until spring, let alone summer. Almost immediately I was ashamed and appalled at my clumsiness, ignorance, insensitivity, call it what you will. With a shock, I realized she was finally asking me what I thought about her illness. She was asking me how long she would live. She was, in fact, asking me if I thought she would live even 6 months. And she was telling me that if I showed I believed she would live until then she would do it. She would not let that expensive purse go unused. That day, I returned the gown and robe and bought the summer purse. That was many years ago. The purse is worn out and long gone, as are at least half a dozen others. And next week, my mother flies to California to celebrate her 83rd birthday. My gift to her, the most expensive designer purse I could find. She'll use it well. And this was in the Journal of the American Medical Association, which is one of the most conservative publications in the country. I figure just about now they are writing that the soft vaccine may work. And yet they published this piece in JAMA, which is quite extraordinary, truly extraordinary. And you know Connecticut Hospital Association up the road in Wallingford? You know, if you keep on going up 68, I was hired there one time, and then 2 years later they hired me back. And a gentleman comes over to me and he says, I want you to know, the first time I came to hear you, they gave me off. This time they refused to let me come again because obviously you're going to say the same thing. I wish I could remember this. He said, but I took the day off as a personal day because I wanted to talk to you. I said, really? He said, yes. He said, last time I heard you, I was so impressed with everything you said. And shortly thereafter, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And when they opened him up, they said the metastasis has gone through his entire body and he's going to be gone in a matter of weeks. So we didn't do anything. Might make him more uncomfortable than necessary. So I said, this is the gentleman speaking to, I said to the doctor, well, will chemotherapy help me? Doctor said no. Well, will any kind of radiation help him? He says, no, nothing's going to help him. He's finished. He said, well, since you can't do anything anyway, would you please tell him you took it out? And the surgeon agreed to tell the father that he had taken the cancer out. Following day, the father, in his 70s, gets out of bed, oh, he's feeling so much better, tells his son, I'm so glad that we had this taken care of, isn't that terrific? He says, and this is 2 years later, and my father's fine, he's traveling, he's having a great time. I said, well, what do you do when you take him to the doctor? He said, what are you, crazy? I'm not going near a doctor. Right? The bottom line, how we feel, has so much to do with the things that are going to happen in our lives, right? There's a person actually in Bridgeport who wrote a book that was called Your Body Hears Everything You Say. And I thought that was a really good way to remember it. So you have to say good things to yourself. When somebody says, oh, that's my bad leg, don't call it a bad leg. You know, you can call the other one a good leg. You know, but this one's giving me a little trouble right now. It's not your bad leg. If it's still attached to you, it's good. That's what I think. So now we know about the heart and the lungs and the lacrimal glands and the capillaries and the pituitary gland. Okay, another wonderful thing that happens when you laugh very hard is you lose muscle tone. I'm sure you've all had that experience, right? Now you can tell when people are losing muscle tone because the first stage of muscle tone loss, we see more with kids. You know, that's when they start weaving back and forth. And then with kids, they start sliding out of their seat, right? And the ultimate loss of muscle tone is when you pee in your pants. So when this happens to you, celebrate. That's a good thing. You're having a very positive reaction. In fact, I remember the first time this happened to me. I was walking home from the Kings Highway Library in Brooklyn, New York. You all knew this was not a Cheshire accent, right? I was walking home with my boyfriend, who was my high school sweetheart, and in fact, the father of my children. Terrific guy. We're walking home from the library, and we're laughing very hard. I'm starting to lose muscle tone. And I couldn't say to him, look, will you please go back to the library? I need a bathroom, because 14-year-old girls do not urinate. So what I did was I tried walking faster, figuring I would get home before it. But about a block from my house, it became apparent this was not to be the case. So what I did was I slowed down and very, very discreetly, I peed into my knee socks. Now, I am 76 years old now. I was then 14, and I still remember the outfit I was wearing. Talk about trauma. I was wearing a beige felt skirt, a brown cardigan sweater with the buttons down the back, and I swished home in my penny loafer. And what I learned from this experience is not that you shouldn't lose muscle tone, because you can be sure I felt a hell of a lot better after, right? What I learned from this experience that if you're a woman who often wears skirts or dresses, wear boots. Now there's one more fabulous gland that is affected when we laugh very hard, and that is the thymus gland. And the thymus gland is located, if you put your chin down in your chest, try this, where your first chin hits your chest. Right under here is our thymus gland. And the thymus gland is part of your immunological system. And its job is to produce Tcells, which supposedly keep us immune and resistant to all kinds of diseases and disorders. And it used to be believed in the first 10, 11, 12 years of life, we produced so many Tcells that by the time we got to be 12 and 13, we didn't need any more, and the thymus gland could just atrophy. We just get absorbed. Well, some researchers are now suggesting that the thymus gland may actually shrink from stress. And therefore, at the time we're entering adolescence, which is such a stressful period, the thymus gland may actually shrink. Now, I'm going to tell you what happened undoubtedly to stress my thymus gland and shrink it when I was 12. When I was 12, we went on a class trip from Brooklyn, New York, in a chartered bus to West Point. You all know where the military academy is? Now, frankly, I have never understood why they took us to West Point. Over the years, I have come to believe that perhaps it was to see Protestant people. Well, you see, those cadets were the first blonde-haired, blue-eyed people I had ever seen. Where I grew up in Brooklyn, everyone was either Jewish or Italian, right? And we do not become blonde until we're older. But I went on this class trip, and when I came back, I ran into my bedroom, I threw myself across my bed, and my sister, who was 11 years older than I, came running in and said, "Joyce, honey, what's the matter?" And I said, "Oh, Terry, all the boys on the bus were teasing me and calling me Queenie, Queen of the Lumberyards, flat as a board." And my sister very calmly said, "How can you look at me and Mommy and worry?" But this was no consolation to a 12-year-old, especially in those days. Did some of you remember the style of nylon blouses? Remember those sheer blouses you could see through? I used to wear 2 slips under my blouse, so you would see 2 sets of straps and think one was a bra. I was so flat-chested, I could not fill a 32 AA training bra, and I don't know what they were training me for. All I did from my 12th birthday on was I prayed for breasts. And for years after that, my brother-in-law used to say to me, "Joyce, you prayed too hard." I prayed so hard that when I started teaching at Southern back in '75, someone came out with the braless craze. You remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, you remember that. And you know there's a special test to see if you need a bra or not? You know the test?
Yes.
Right, the pencil test, right. You take a pencil, you put it under your breast. If the pencil falls to the ground, you don't need a bra. Right, I lost a 12-pack of number 2 pencils with this test. I am living proof of the value of prayer in a person's life. Speaking of that, you know about the old lady who wanted to commit suicide? She calls up a doctor and says, "Doctor, where's my heart?" He said, "It's 3 inches below your left breast." So she shot her kneecap. This was a lady who prayed too hard, right? But I'm sure you can recognize at the time I was 12, my thymus gland did a lot of shrinking, right? Now, there are many people who know about the thymus gland. According to a tribe, actually, in New Guinea, that are called the thymus thumblers. And what they do for 10 or 15 minutes every day is they thump their thymi, and this apparently keeps them alive and studyable forever. Right? You never hear about a study of it other than these people, right? Now, many of you, I'm sure, are Catholic. What do Catholic people do when you've done something wrong? Mea culpa, mea culpa. I know I did bad, but please don't shrink. Jewish people take a whole day off of this every year. Yom Kippur, it was just 2 weeks ago, right? We go to synagogue and read off a list of about 100 sins that could have been committed by anybody in the community. And for every sin we say, for the sin which I committed doing this, for the sin which I committed doing that, grant me atonement. right? I know I did bad, but please don't shrink. So it is possible that we can reactivate our thymus gland by hitting ourselves, but there is reason to believe that laughter can automatically stimulate the thymus gland. All right, is there anybody who is not convinced that it is good for you to laugh physically? You got that? You got this message? All right, so now I'm going to give you a few pointers on how to bring a little more laughter into your life. Okay? To start with, do not read the newspaper more than once every 2 or 3 weeks. The newspaper is designed to depress you, as is evidenced by what's the most respected newspaper in America? Times, New York Times. You can get a hernia lifting it. Right? And yet in all those pages, they don't have room for one-page of comics. What they are telling us is to be a credible newspaper, you're not supposed to make people laugh. I say fie on the newspaper. Don't read the paper too often. If something important happens, someone will tell you. Right? There is no question. And for those of you who say, oh yeah, I don't read the paper much, but you watch the news, I want to give you a piece of advice. And truly, if you don't remember anything else that I'm telling you today, but this one thing, I promise it will change your life. If you are a person who watches the news, I get it. There are a lot of people, news junkies, I get it. Do not watch the news right before you go to sleep at night. All right? What happens when we're laughing is all of this thing. I'm talking about endorphins and enkephalins and all these positive, anti-pain kinds of things that we produce in our own bodies. When we are stressed, we produce cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. And if you go to sleep after being stressed, and by the way, if you are watching the news and are not stressed, seriously, you need very much therapy. Okay? So you're going to feel stressed if you're watching the news. And my suggestion is do not watch the news right before you go to bed. Because instead of bathing your entire body and all your internal organs in positive hormones, you are bathing your internal organs in negativity. Why would you do that? So at the very least, right before you go to bed at night, watch Everybody Loves Raymond, watch Seinfeld, watch Golden Girls. Absolutely. Those are what I have my stations on permanently. And before you go to sleep, laugh. And when you wake up in the morning, you will feel like a new person. I promise you, you will feel better. If you take this one little piece of advice. Okay, another piece of advice. You want more laughter in your life? Whenever possible, sleep with someone funny looking. The Zen Buddhists believe if you can laugh first thing in the morning, you'll be fine for the rest of your day. No better way to do this than you open up your eyes and go, ha, 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 ha. Now, if you don't have someone funny looking to sleep with, borrow. The library and every other good institution in this town has a list of volunteers. And I am absolutely positive you'll have no trouble finding a volunteer. Okay, that's a wonderful thing. Now, if you really can't find somebody funny looking to sleep with, second best but far inferior, when you get up in the morning, look at yourself in the mirror. And say to yourself, before your cup of coffee, say to yourself, I am a Cheshire resident. Tee-hee-hee. And when you see how you look first thing in the morning, right? Yeah. You have a choice of either laughing or crying. And I always figure if you have a choice, it's better to laugh because crying makes your eyelids sweat. Okay, another suggestion. Okay, so you're not going to read the newspaper, and you're not going to certainly watch the news before you go to bed at night, and you're going to sleep with someone funny on. Another suggestion. When you go shopping for clothing, don't ever buy anything that doesn't make you smile when you see how you're looking in the mirror. We reflect that how we think we look. And when you feel like you look blah, you are bitchy to everyone. Have you ever noticed that? It's so scary. I have been teaching my whole entire life. Since 65 when I got my first master's, I have been teaching, and I'm always amazed how people wear all these happy colors, bright happy colors and flowers and pretty patterns, all spring, all summer, and in the fall. And then in the winter, when all the friggin' trees are dead, right? The grass is brown, and you need color, like gray skies. And the teachers start wearing brown and khaki. No, okay? You are part of each other's environment, okay? So what you need to do that's exactly right. Perfect is a great example of a person who's wearing her drapes on the bottom. Perfect. Bright chartreuse. Perfect. You're absolutely perfect. When you see somebody dressed this way in the middle of winter, you have got to smile. You have to feel better. And it is our job to make sure that we are carrying with us symbols that it's important to laugh more. Okay, so that's something that you absolutely have to do. And my favorite store used to be right here, Marshall's. Right here, right on Route 10, Marshall's. And I would buy things just because they were marked half price or size 3. And what would happen is I'd go put it on in the morning and I'd say, how can I inflict this on my students? So I'd end up taking it off. Don't buy it in the first place. It costs no more money to buy these beautiful colors that I see around me than it costs to buy beige and khaki. And as Chris will tell you, 80% of us are winters or summers anyway, and we have to stay away from beige and khaki, right? So wear happy things, you'll feel better, and everybody around you will feel better. Another suggestion, when you get home today, sit down by yourself, don't let anybody help you with this. Sit down by yourself and make a list of 20 things you like to do. 20 things that you personally consider to be fun. And commit yourself to doing at least 10 of the things on this list every single day. That is how we nurture ourselves. You don't nurture yourself by waiting for vacations. You nurture yourself by doing some fun things every day. All right? I update my list every semester with one of my classes who are all special ed teachers. And I talk to them about stress and burnout. I do not believe that anybody burns out from a job. And by the way, we all have jobs. The fact that we're not paid for them doesn't mean you're not working. In fact, I have to say to you, I work much harder when I'm not teaching than when I'm, in the house. I'm working much harder, right? So we all have jobs. People burn out from jobs. They burn out from marriages. They burn out from taking care of their houses. They burn out from a variety of things. What causes burnout is not having enough stuff in your day to nurture you. We need to nurture ourselves. All right, so I have on my list things like telling jokes, talking to friends on the telephone, eating ice cream, having my back scratched. On an average day, I am able to do 18 of my 20 things. And when my husband wasn't tired, it would be 19. And if the neighbor would have come over, it could have been 20, Well, my neighbor was very funny, especially here in Cheshire. Okay, but the fact of the matter is, we need to laugh more, and one of the ways to do it is to plan your day and know what you're going to do that makes you feel better. I have one of my closest friends named Connie Pino, every morning at 6:30, calls me on the telephone. And I pick up the phone and I say, good morning, sunshine, and she says, good morning, wonderful person, or whatever. And we count the fun that we had the day before. We talk about the good things that we're going to be doing today, right? And that starts off our day connected to somebody loving. And if you have somebody, if you're fortunate enough to have a spouse or a spouse equivalent or a good friend who lives with you, that's wonderful. If you do not, reach out to a friend that you can speak to every day who's on the same schedule as you. If you're a later riser, you don't need a phone call at 6:30 in the morning. Make it at 8 o'clock, make it at 9 o'clock. It doesn't, the time is not what's relevant. What's relevant is that you feel connected first thing in your day to somebody you really care about. And that is a gift to both of you. I cannot tell you how life-changing. We both started this practice when our husbands were ill, and since that time, both of our husbands are gone. But we still have maintained that practice of getting to talk to somebody fun first thing in the morning. All right? Now, another suggestion, and this really is the most important suggestion. If you want more laughter in your life, you must surround yourself with positive people. Because when you surround yourself with negative people, what do they do to you? They just bring you down. They drag you down. My friend Steve Schmitz was a real doctor. Calls these people energy suckers. Isn't that a great name? It's like they take an invisible straw and they put it directly into your center and they go, and you go, oh. Did you ever notice how you're walking around going, oh, and you pass somebody else and they go, oh, and you say, oh, Joe must have been here. Don't we know who these people are? I'm not talking about people with occasional problems. Everybody has an occasional problem. You're entitled to be heard. I am talking about people whose hobby it is to drag you down. And if you watch their modus operandi, it is as though they are pollinating flowers. Here's a miserable story for you, and a rotten story for you, and something worse for you. And they seem not to be happy until we are all going, oh my God. And you know the worst part? Truthfully, the worst part is we end up in their space. Did you ever notice that they are telling us all this rotten stuff, and you say, you think that's bad? Listen to this. How pathetic is that? That we have to one-up other people's terrible stories? When you get one of these energy suckers comes and approaches you, and you know what you're going to hear from them, what you need to say is, I'm not in the place for a negative story today. if enough of us had the guts to make that one simple statement, these people would get better material. That's right. Because they would recognize that they're losing their audience. They're losing the people who will listen to them and stand there and commiserate. We do not need to do that. When you hang out with positive people, the world becomes a lighter, brighter, happier place, and we become more creative. Because sometimes somebody may tell you wonderful things, and maybe that day you may not have something wonderful to share. So my suggestion is, make something up. Nobody does not know, nobody knows, that you have not won a small lottery in Montana. No one has ever been to Montana. Well, you know about the 3 ladies meet in Florida. One lady says to the other, you know, my son is a psychiatrist and he makes a wonderful living. Every year he sends me $100,000. And sometimes I don't even want to buy anything, but I don't want him to feel bad, so I spend it. So the third lady says, fantastic. Now the second lady says, well, my son is a marvelous psychologist, and he every year sends me a ticket for a trip around the world. And sometimes I don't even want to go anyplace, but I don't want he should feel bad, so I go. So again, the third lady says, fantastic. Now the first and second lady look at the third lady and say, what about you? You got a son. What about your son? Well, she says, my son's a teacher. He makes a living. Comes for a visit now and then. But the best thing he did is he sent me for charm school. I said, charm school? So what's charm school? Because charm school is where they teach us fantastic instead of bullshit. Feel free to make up a happy story. When I am in Florida, every single person that I have met tells me their grandchildren were accepted to Yale and Harvard and Princeton. Every single grandchild, and somehow or another they rejected those Ivy League schools in order to go to Southern or Rutgers or someplace in whatever state they are, right? Good. They are feeling better. I'm feeling great. Isn't that wonderful? Right? We can all celebrate bullshit with each other because it is fantastic. Okay? Now, I would like you to participate in one little activity, and during this activity, I want you to stand up. If you can't stand up, we will come to you, but if you can, come stand up into the openings. And after this activity, you'll take your seat, and I will close up my portion of our day at the Cheshire Library. Okay, I want each of you to come into the openings. Come on. Okay, I want each of you to find 5 people in this room, preferably some people you have not met before. Give these people a hug and giggle. The giggle is very important. Do this right now. Did everybody get at least 5? Did everybody get at least 5? On the way out, you got to get one more. Okay? By the way, you cannot get pregnant from this. You don't have to worry. You don't have to take a blood test first. It's very nice. Hugging is a wonderful thing, and it's going to be a lost art if we let these kids stay only on the cell phone. So I hope you will pass that on. Bye. I would like to close my program today in my wonderful, favorite library in the entire world with something that I've always loved. And in fact, I got this from Sophie Dutton. For some of you remember Sophie? She used to send me stuff from the Phoenix Society, which is an organization of seniors from the olden days. I don't even know if it exists anymore. From the olden days, who thought it was important to stay up, right? Because if you're going to be alive, you might just as well not just take up space. Might as well be having some fun. And the name of this is the present. Imagine there is a bank that credits your account each morning with $86,400. It carries over no balance from day to day. Every evening it deletes whatever part of the balance you failed to use during the day. What would you do? Spend it, of course. Draw out every cent, of course. Each of us has such a bank. Its name is time. Every morning, it credits us with 86,400 seconds. Every night, it writes off as lost whatever of this we have failed to use to the purpose. It carries over no balance. It allows no overdraft. Each day it opens a new account for us. Each night it burns the remains of the day. If we fail to use the day's deposits, the loss is ours. There is no going back. There is no drawing against tomorrow. We must live in the present on today's deposits and invest it so as to get from it the utmost in health, happiness, and success. The clock is running. Make the most of today. To realize the value of 1 year, ask a student who failed a grade. To realize the value of 1 month, ask a mother who gave birth to a premature baby. To realize the value of 1 minute, ask a person who just missed the train. To realize the value of 1 second, ask a person who wrongfully ended her best relationship. To realize the value of 1 millisecond, ask the person who won a silver medal in the Olympics. Treasure every moment that we have, and treasure it more because we shared it with someone special. Special enough to spend our time. And remember, time waits for no one. Yesterday is history, tomorrow a mystery, today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.